Hi, I'm Paul Robichaux, Chief Technology Officer at Quadrotech, and I have the pleasure to be joined today by the inimitable Tony Redmond. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. And you?
Good. As well as could be expected.
Oh, good. Because I'm about to ruin your day. I want to talk about
good.
something that is near and dear to my heart that I get a lot of customer questions and feedback about, and that is Office 365 reporting and auditing.
Okay.
Usually what I hear from customers is, why is it so darn hard?
To report or to audit? Because they're
Both.
two different things.
Well, both. They're hard in different ways, but they're both hard.
I guess one of the reasons is that there's just so much data out there. We to be fair to Microsoft, they have they capture a lot of information and they generate a lot of information. So understanding what that information is I think that's the big challenge. I mean, if you take auditing, for example, there is a huge amount of audit data generated. And again, Microsoft have done a great job by establishing a baseline for all of the workloads to operate against, so they all generate audit reports pretty well at this stage. They all normalize those audit records. They get the audit records into the Office 365 audit log. Some of them get there quicker than others, but that's okay. They eventually all get there. But that still doesn't take away from the fact that at the end of the day, you end up with maybe 5,500, 6,000 records a day for a very small tenant. And that's just fine if you like looking through audit records bit by bit by bit. Not so good if you don't. Same type of thing with reporting. I mean, you could have hundreds, thousands, millions of mailboxes inside an Office 365 tenant. So how do you go and report all that stuff? Just the kind of techniques that you might use in on-premises implementations don't work so well in the cloud because there's throttling and stuff. So it's a bit of an issue.
It can be. I like what you said about the volume of audit data.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Microsoft has done a lot of work. They've come a very long way since the early days of the service in terms of getting all that data and putting it into one place where people can see it. But what I hear from customers is that the tools Microsoft provides to go through that data and try to make sense of it are not what they would like them to be. You think that's a fair statement?
It depends what you're looking for. It depends what you're looking for. Because let's take it, first let's understand what gets audited. So pretty well,
Okay.
It's up to every application what they consider to be important operations. You may have a different definition of that, but at the end of the day, they get to vote,
and we should probably back up a step and say that we're mostly talking about access auditing and not necessarily admin action.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is stuff that people do, but there's a mixture of both.
Sure.
I mean, if you wanted to, let's look at SharePoint, for example. SharePoint is a very chatty audit application. And it's because of the type of the background the SharePoint had. It's a document management system. So it's really important to understand when somebody has worked on a document, somebody has changed a document, somebody has updated a document or downloaded a document. Those are the kind of things that get audited. You throw in OneDrive for Business, which is also based on top of SharePoint, and you get a whole new set of audit records. And here you see things like a huge number of records for synchronization events because, of course, in the background, you've got the OneDrive sync client busy synchronizing document libraries until the cows come home. And then if you look at other applications, Teams is a good example. They can be terribly chatty in terms of just telling you that somebody's connected. And that comes back to the way they authenticate. You've got these access tokens, they expire after an hour. So if you've got a Teams client logged in all day long, you're going to get 24 audit records just for that one user. Doesn't tell you very much except that they had a lot, their access token expired all the time. And then you put all the audit stuff on top of that, so you get things like sites being created or channels being created, teams being created, an exchange as a whole pile of administrative operations. So generally you get a lot of audit records.
So is it just a problem with signal to noise? Is it just that people have trouble picking out the audit events that they want to see using
I think
Microsoft
that's
tools?
probably the case. I think firstly they have to understand what audit information is there, so what actions are audited. Now, there's some reasonably good information out there, but you have to read that information, understand then what's audited, what could be useful to you, what are you going to go look for. There's no point in going looking for the needle in the haystack until you understand what the needle looks like.
Sure.
So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is to figure out what tools you're going to use. Now, you asked a very good question, are the standard tools good enough? Sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not so good. They're great if you can be very precise. If you can say, I want to know what Paul Robichaux did to a document in that particular site between the hours of 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. on the 27th of January, it'll find it. Pretty good. No problem there. That's because you're precise. But unfortunately, what tends to happen is that people are awfully woolly when they start searches. You have a general sense that somebody did something sometime.
Right. I think I worked on this document on Thursday, and when I looked at it on Monday, it was different what happened.
Yeah, but that's you saying it, but you were the person who did it. You see, the thing about it is when you're interested in audit records, it's more likely somebody else did it, and they may not want to tell you that they did it.
Fair point.
Right. So therefore, it's like, I have a suspicion that Mr. X or Madam X did something to a certain piece of information in this certain time frame, and I don't know why. And I don't know how, and I don't know when, but I've got to go look. And it could be that some documents have gone missing. It could be that an ex-employee is maybe suspected of taking a whole pile of documents away with them. It may have been answering the questions that come up. Who read that message in the CEO's mailbox, or who deleted that message in the CEO's mailbox? All of these type of things you don't actually know. So the first thing is figuring out, okay, the scope of what you're looking for, the actions you're looking for, who did it, when they approximately did it, and then go and have a look. And again, if you can be pretty precise, then the Office 365 tools, they'll do a pretty good job. There is a pretty good event viewer for you to go and look through, the audit log search. There's PowerShell if you really want to get down and dirty. But I do think that once your level of fuzziness goes up in the searches, or the amount of data that you have to deal with, if you're in a tenant that's only got 200 accounts, it's one thing. If you're in a tenant with 20,000 accounts, then it's totally a different matter. And gosh, if you go up much to the biggest ones, the hundreds of thousands, then you need a lot of help. And so and I guess another thing too that comes into play is that some of the scenarios that we're now dealing with, where you have, for example, in GDPR, when somebody says to you, well, you have some of my personal information. I need to know what happened to that.
Right.
Okay. Office 365, because of the volume of data that it preserves, only keeps that data for 90 days. I mean, you think about it, the number of tenants that Office 365 has, multiplied by the number of users. Microsoft says 120 million. That's the latest figure. It's growing by about 3.5 million a month. That they're generating a lot of audit records every day. So to minimize the impact on the service as a whole, they only keep audit data for 90 days. So that creates another complication. So I think if you're going to do really sophisticated audit searches over a lot of data, over a long time, you're probably going to look outside Office 365. You're going to look for help, and that's third-party help.
Exactly, and so fortunately, as you know, we have products that do exactly that.
Yep, I have noticed that.
Timeline-based audit review, so that you can look at a timeline and see what happened during this defined time period. Searching, sorting, filtering, they go far beyond what Microsoft offers. We're doing some pretty interesting things that we'll be talking about a little later this year around using machine learning to try to ferret out patterns of behavior to help people understand when something atypical happens. Alerting so that you can receive a notification. Sometimes we talk about the distinction between calling the fire department when you see a fire in the kitchen and hearing your smoke alarm go off so that you know.
But again, you guys
have
got a challenge here, though. I mean, you've got a challenge that when you talk about machine learning and AI and all the rest of it, Microsoft has already showed how that can be applied.
Sure.
Because they have the advanced security management as part of Office 365 E5. They've also got some of the alerting that occurs inside E3 and E5. You've got alert policies and activity alerts. All of these things, though, depend on one thing, and that is that the data is being ingested at different times.
Right.
So, telling me that somebody has just downloaded 400 documents when they left the building an hour ago is probably not going to be helpful. But, that's what happens. So I think the challenge for you guys is to do a number of things. I think firstly is to be smarter than what the Microsoft guys are doing and what they have developed. And second is, if at all possible, to try and make use of that data faster so that you can bring it to the attention of people who need to action that data a little quicker. So I'm really interested to see what you got, because there's no doubt the radar security and audit reports or tool set that's there today can make sense of that haystack. I mean, I've seen it, I've used it myself in a couple of cases to try and track down what happened, where and when. And it's really very good, especially as you say, the advanced filtering techniques, pivot tables, that kind of stuff is really good. It goes far more than the Microsoft tools can deliver.
No,
but you do have a challenge as things actually scale up.
We do. You said something that I want to use to pivot to talk about reporting for a second, which is that Microsoft is doing some advanced security analytics that they
Yes.
bundle with a more expensive license.
Yes.
Right. It's one of the many things that you get when you step up to E5, but it's one of the many things that help drive that price up. On the reporting side, Microsoft, it seems to me, is trying very hard to give people the 80% case of the bare minimum of reports that you might reasonably want as an administrator, just so they can say, we have some reports. And in doing that, they are positioning their reports as being a good enough commodity.
I think you've got to remember, there's truth there, but first I think you've got to remember that the vast bulk of the Office 365 tenants that run today in the world are small companies.
Yes.
So therefore, the needs of a small company to report on what's happening in terms of who's doing what, where and when, the activity and all that stuff, it's much simpler than you get in the average large enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
Once you scale up, you've got more users doing more things in more locations with more devices. That's when the problems lie. So what Microsoft has done is that they've set perhaps a baseline for the entire industry to say, okay, free out of Office 365, you get this. And you know what? For the vast bulk of our Office 365 tenants, it's going to be good enough. For those that need more, well, that's when the experts, the folks that really just concentrate, they think about reporting day in, day out. They focus on reporting. They live reporting. They think about what's going to become next in reporting. I think that's the role that ISVs like Quadrotech play. Because you guys, if you like, you have the luxury to reflect on the gaps that Microsoft leave and figure out how to fill them. I mean, that's your role.
It is, and it's a good role for us to be in. It's a good position for us to be in because, as you say, Microsoft is focusing on, and I don't have the exact figures to hand, but if you look at a graph of the total number of tenants and the total number of seats, the total number of tenants is overwhelmingly slanted toward that small business end. But the total number of seats per tenant is overwhelmingly slanted at the other end.
But that's the case in all businesses. I mean, you just look at what's the figure in the United States? There's something like 600,000 new businesses founded yearly,
right? Something
like that. So that just gives you and what size of those businesses going to be. But for those businesses, none of them today would go think about putting in an on-premises Exchange server or an on-premises SharePoint server. They can go and they can buy Office 365 entry-level plan, and they get all of the same functionality that large organizations have. So that's the reason why Office 365 is so popular with the small to medium businesses, and that's what Microsoft serve.
But as you said, that leaves a significant niche for us to exploit for advanced reporting and advanced analytics for larger businesses or ones that have more complicated reporting needs.
Yeah, just keep on pumping out smarter reports that make more sense, more analytic sense of all of that data that Office 365 continues to generate for all of its activities across all of its workloads, and you'll do just fine.
We can do that. Thanks, Tony.
No problem.
To learn more about our products, visit our website at www.quadrotech-it.com. Thanks.